Welcome, everybody. We're excited to get going on this one. We got Ryan over at Assembled joining us. Ryan, thanks for joining. How are you?
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Yeah. Excited to get into this topic, support operations, some of the cool things you guys see in your day to day. But before we do, maybe take just a minute, tell us some of the things, a little bit about your background and some of the cool things you guys do over there at Assembled.
Yeah. So I'm Ryan, co-founder CEO at Assembled. I've worn a lot of different hats. I'm the second CEO. I was writing code, I was working on marketing, and now kind of pointing people around. What we do is we are the AI platform for superhuman support. So our AI agent automates over 70% of interactions over chat, over email, over voice. Our workforce management platform automates forecasting, scheduling, real-time management for support operations, really of all shapes and sizes. So companies like Ashley Furniture, like Brooks, like Robinhood,
Hmm.
they all trust our platform. And so, my own background is I was at this payments company, Stripe, who's also a customer of ours. And right there, when it was 80 people, when it was the co-founders, Patrick and John Collison, doing support themselves and having the whole company over to their apartment to do support tickets with them. And it was called all company support
I
rotation.
love that. I love
Um,
that.
and we saw Stripe scale, like my co-founders and I, from 80 to about 800 people. And like
Wow.
at 800 people, like you can't really have everybody fit into the apartment anymore. And so, turned to what are systems like workforce management that help a company scale to that size and to millions of customers. And so a lot of the companies we work with today are at some point along that journey. And so really, yeah, that's how we got into support operations
I
is
love it.
help
I love
companies
it. Yeah, I haven't heard that term for a while, all company support, but I love the
scale.
idea. I think it's valuable, especially as you kind of get going. You got to have everybody kind of participate to fill and experience what's been going on. So, fun background. I appreciate the quick overview. Let's dive into the talk track. So, obviously, you guys deal with a lot of different areas, but I love this idea of customer support operations or customer support. It seems like it's a little bit of a crossroads with some of this AI and the new technologies. What do you feel like some of the fundamental shifts are in how companies are approaching this idea of support operations?
Yeah, I talk to a lot of support leaders and it keeps changing, by the way. Like I think what I'm hearing from a lot of leaders now is we're trying to do more with the same.
Yeah.
Trying to do more with the
Yeah.
same. One customer of ours, their top line is growing 30%. The volumes that contacts they expect is growing 30%. And the CFO said, here's your budget for this year. There's zero net new headcount.
It's so
It's
true.
completely
It's so
flat.
true.
You get
It's so
no
true.
headcount and just make it grow, right? And so
Good
AI
luck
has
with that. Good luck. I love it. Do
please
more with
figure it
less. I
out.
mean, that's the title of the day for sure.
And so I think that's a real challenge. And I think AI is part of a lot of people's story. Part of that is automation, but it's not the whole story. Like I
Yeah.
think if you kind of break up support into tier one, tier two, tier three, even, a lot of the cuts that people look at, like there's some amount of automation in tier one, not all of it, maybe
Yeah.
70%, 80%. There's some amount of AI co-pilots making people more efficient and more effective at tier two. And then tier three, like I think the long-term aspiration, certainly when I got into support, like we started in 2018, we'd hear this all the time. Support's not a cost center.
Yeah.
Big companies trying to take it towards concierge type of experience.
Yes. Right.
Great
Right.
companies trying to that really recognize, hey, support is here not just as a kind of like defense of churn. It's like preventing attrition, like it's driving up retention, but it's also this incredible driver of customer happiness
Mhm.
and cross sell and upsell over time. And so we are seeing like the best companies thinking about it that way. It's not just like how do we get AI to cut some percentage of our team, but how do we make people way better and upskill them
Yeah.
and put them in positions to succeed? Because that's why we have support in the first place.
Yeah, yeah. Look, I think that's a great kind of framing of how things are shaping up. I'm curious. You kind of mentioned some of the things even as we were talking earlier, but the obviously the AI and the reps, and I'm curious how you see this evolving. So much talk with some companies eliminating some companies, going all in on AI. How do you see it evolving over the next few years?
Yeah, well, I think even one of our customers put it best because I asked him, and he's like a engineer, is founder, CTO turned president of a really large EOR, employer of record, one of these global
Yep.
payroll companies. And I asked him this exact question, and he said something that I think is pretty sharp. He said, in that tier one segment, 70% of this will be automated, Maybe it's 80%, maybe it's
Yeah.
60% plus or minus, but like some percentage of it. But by the way, the rest of it, the rest of the 30% of tier one, our business is really complex because they're an EOR. Their customers are asking, okay, like what are the employment laws of Germany? How do you set up a business in Australia? And like LLMs, AI will hallucinate. And he said, actually, I don't want to trust these types of questions.
Hmm.
In LM, I want a person to solve that. I want a specialist because we train people really well and we train people for each of these countries to understand what's going on. So I want
Yeah.
that to go to a person.
Yeah.
That rest of tier one and the rest of tier two, I want them to have AI co-pilots that make them more productive,
Yeah.
accelerate training. Some of our other customers we've been talked to, like it still takes months, 8 weeks to months to train people. Like that's a really long time, especially if you're
He's an onboarding. Yeah.
it's
That is.
growing at that kind of rate. And then in tier three, it really is like they're specialists. They're specialists, but like we want to know how to utilize them appropriately. We want to make sure when they're dropping
Sure.
them in places, like that's the best possible use of their time, and impacting the business in a big way. So I think it really is this kind of nuanced thing. We're past the world of even just like a year ago when you would read all these kind of like breathless headlines of like, okay, we're like AI is going to replace everybody. I think it wants to be.
Do you feel like I was just thinking of a conversation I had not long ago where someone was like, "Hey, if yeah," and I like the way you kind of structured it, tier one, tier two, tier three, and maybe where AI fits. But I had a conversation with the leader, this was maybe 2 weeks ago, and they were like, "I don't know what all the fuss is then about AI. Like if it's just going to take like tier one, kind of these where's my order type stuff. Like I've already got a pretty good chat bot in place, workflow based, that's already kind of doing that. What's all the fuss and muss about, right? Why can't I just do that or continue with that? What's kind of your answer to people who are trying to figure out, and I'm using the chatbot as an example, there's probably other areas, but this idea of moving from like a workflow based engine to more of like a generative AI engine, like why make the switch? Even in tier one, if I'm already seeing some good progress with my dumb chatbot, he seems fine. Why not continue to use him?
Yeah, I mean, I think I mean, that is part of my belief, and maybe this is like the leader you talked about too, is like this stuff is a lot more iterative
Yeah,
people would have you believe, right?
yeah,
Um, I think Live Person, went public in the 2000s, and they were the AI, conversational chatbot. And it's like not the first time we've seen this before. It went from AI to big data to machine learning and all the way back to AI.
yeah,
I think in some sense this stuff is a lot more iterative. Like there's
yeah,
nothing new under the sun. A lot of these are old ideas. I do think like um, there's a lot of big changes in terms of what LLMs are capable of. They're a lot more dynamic.
yeah.
Um, you listen to some of the voice bots, and those are dynamic and sound very lifelike, and you can kind of
Man, yeah, I just did a demo of a voice bot the other day, and because I don't know, sometimes the chat bot, I actually kind of agreed with that leader. Sometimes it's like, I don't know, you don't feel it as much, but man, on the voice bot, I was like having a full conversation about politics and some weird stuff. And this voice bot was like, not only quick, a great voice, fast,
fast.
little latency, surprisingly deep on the breadth of its ability to handle a conversation, not just so I'm glad you brought up voice because that was probably one of the first times where I was like, whoa, that's cooler than maybe some of the things I've seen on the chat side of the house. That's a
And
good
I
one.
think this stuff is coming to market. Like I think everybody would have you believe, like okay, the companies have already adopted it. No, it's a lot more complicated because you have to like stitch it together and you have to get it production ready. But
Yeah,
yes, I think that is a good illustration of why people are so excited. It's like that's a step function difference in terms of the capability, and I
yeah,
think it should cause companies to rethink their strategies, right? Like I remember a customer very early on was in the kind of like omni-channel world, right? Where
yeah,
like, hey, like maybe the channel doesn't matter anymore. And if you can have an AI that's just as good over chat, just as good over email, just as
yeah.
voice, and then you're gonna have to pass it to a person anyway, like maybe don't think about your strategy as like digital,
Boom,
like
boom, boom.
chat,
Yeah.
email, voice, etc. Like it's one frame.
I like it. I like it. One of the words that's come up often with our clientele is this word of operational efficiency or
Yeah.
operational excellence. And sometimes I feel like that's a word that's needs a little more explanation or definition. Where do you go with something like that? How do you define that or help companies start to realize what that might mean in your mind?
Yeah, I think operational excellence. I'll tell you, um, one of the stories that I heard recently from one of our leaders at like one of the very large delivery companies, and um, I think it is ultimately being able to tie numbers to what's actually happening. And so, this was a director level of workforce management, was meeting with the CEO and CEO of their company, and they asked a very simple question, just how do we actually know that we're solving our customers' issues? Like, how would
Yeah.
we know at scale? And they pulled up this example, and I think like the best teams really are able to tie their numbers to these examples. They pulled up this example where a customer had an $800 order on a weekend, it got canceled. They're frustrated, they wrote into support,
Yep.
or give them a refund. Like, boom, done. Like that's what the policy says. Give them a refund. That was a big order. But if you look a little bit further into it, it's like, well, this was for a big event. This is big for a
Right.
big family event. The refund doesn't really
It
get to
doesn't actually. Yeah.
like, this is an important thing. Here's our money
Right.
back. Like, and you probably lost a really good customer for a long time, or at least like really hurt their relationship with the company.
Totally.
That question, like, how do we know we're actually solving our customers' problems? I think like the operational excellence is the ability to take like, okay, like here's our SLA, here's our response time, here's our resolution rate with our AI agent, here's our deflection rate, and here's the end-to-end customer journey. And we've
Yeah.
integrated it all across the system that we know we're really
Yeah.
doing the right thing.
I like that. Yeah, that's one of those stories where yeah, it's like yeah, that it's a little head scratching, I guess, to hear that. But I think a lot of people find themselves in that motion, and so it is. You got to kind of figure out how you can tie those things probably better, a little more effectively. Where do you think people should start on this journey? I think a lot of leaders they want operations to be a competitive advantage. They hear something like what you're saying around efficiency, and they think it's a great idea, but they're like, where do I start? What's the first thing you think people should do to kind of start on that journey?
Yeah, well, I'm coming from the vantage of like workforce management, right? Where
Yeah.
one of the really simple things that we do is help people understand like quality and efficiency. You usually see these as kind of like at odds.
Totally.
And one of the insights of workforce management is that it's not necessarily, right? Because if you line up, okay, when are we getting phone calls? What's the arrival pattern look like? If you're able to pull that out of your tool, if you're able to translate that, okay, knowing how productive people are, here's how many people we need staffed, and then look at just when are people staffed. Like that's the core insight of workforce management is line up supply and demand. A lot of companies, the first time you look, and it's like, our busy time is Tuesday morning. We've got people staffed for Wednesday afternoon. Like if you shift that a little bit, you're going to have quality and efficiency at the same time.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I
Yeah.
think people like at the front lines understand this. Like I remember one of our customers, one of our earliest customers was with e-commerce company, and they were like, "Yeah, we always knew like that was the busy time." And if like there's a difference between the busy time and there's the time when people are kind of like twiddling their thumbs, it's like flatten that out a little bit. And I think those are really operational, really systems level questions.
Yeah. 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 Look, I think that's right. I mean, I think a lot of people struggle with that quality and quantity kind of balance, this efficiency type thing you were talking about. But you're right. I mean, it's a good example. It's probably a fairly simple example. Sometimes people get it, but it is harder in practice to manage that kind of busy time with your resourcing. But I think finding that balance becomes pretty important. One of the things on my mind personally I'm curious about, and I think a lot of our customers are so much new technology in the space, and so many people talking about point solutions, other people talking about more like unified platforms. I'm curious how you kind of coach or think how you'd advise people to think through as they continue to try to find the right tools to run their business. Point solutions, unified platforms. How do I kind of manage this best for me and my group?
Yeah, well, we really, when we talk to the leaders, like the question they're ultimately trying to ask, which I think is the right one, is just how do we make support better?
Yeah, yeah.
And they have a map in their minds of like the tech stack, the customer journey, and how these two things kind of interlock. And so, you might really want a point solution in certain points
Hmm.
of, if it's like AI because you really want to be innovative there, you really want to be
Yeah.
an early adopter, or you might not. Like you might not because like it's a lot more iterative
Hmm.
of a space. And so like when we've helped companies work backwards from like, okay, where are the greatest
Yeah.
gains in terms of improving the customer experience? Like, I think that's really always led them to the right things. And we always tell people like, here's our kind of like menu, here's all the folks that we work with and like pros and cons. Because I don't think that, it's such a competitive dynamic out in this market. Like there's nobody that stinks. Like I
Yeah,
don't think
yeah.
that like, there's a lot of different vendors with things that they're good at and things that they're not so good at. And kind of like you got to kind of pick and choose and understand what you need.
Where it goes. No, I mean that's true. I've often said that. I mean, I look at some of the people in our space and I wanted to be like, man, they're terrible, but actually I'm like, they're pretty good. Actually, they're okay. So
Respect. Respect.
it is I wish they were worse and make my job easier sometimes, but there are a lot of great tools out there for sure. Maybe before we leave, I just one maybe forward looking comment or question, so much change going on. What do you think this next frontier in support operation looks like? And maybe what are you most excited about?
Yeah. I'm most excited about the difficult question that we keep getting from folks, which is like, you know, what is the role for people?
Yeah,
I think it feels like we're already past that talking point of like do more with less, like let's cut teams, like AI is going to replace people. But
yeah,
from all the companies that I talk to, from all the leaders I talk to, from all the agents I talk to, like that left a real kind of like chill in terms of like people's receptiveness to AI. And
yeah,
so, I think it's wonderful technology. I think everybody uses ChatGPT in some form or fashion. And yet, like in the kind of like business world, it's like there actually is like a little bit of reticence here, and rightfully so, because I think for support leaders, the question is like, how do you make humans and AI work together in
yeah,
tandem? It shouldn't be replacing people's jobs. Like, and to the extent that it is, it should be moving people along in this kind of like upskilling way. Like that's what everybody that I talk to wants to do. Now, how to kind of show that path forward, I think becomes really important. And that's what I'm excited about. Is like, what does this upskilling look like?
yeah, yeah. I like that one. I think you're right. We've moved past some of the base, like let's move on past the do more with less and let's kind of move to the next phase. I think that's a great kind of frame up for that. So, hey, Ryan, appreciate the conversation. Fun to just kind of chit chat a little bit about some of the things you're seeing. You've got some fun stories. I think some very practical advice. So, again, really appreciate you taking the time to join us today. And for the audience, enjoy the rest of your day.